Shalom, shalom, brothers and sisters, friends and family all over the world. What an awesome opportunity it is to be alive in these last days so that we may know and understand the truth regarding the name of the one and only Elohim, the Elohim of all the earth, the one who created all that is, was, and ever shall be, whose eternal name is Yahuwah. Yahuwah says that his name is his mention, his decree to every single generation. And this is his name forever. So we must understand the name of Yahuwah, for it is the centerpiece of all of Scripture. It is the centerpiece of the entirety of what are called the Hebrew Scriptures, appearing nearly 7,000 times there alone, and then reappearing through the form, hallelujah, in the book of Revelation, chapter 19, when the whore of Babylon is destroyed, it is announced, hallelujah. So we see Yah in the Greek version of the Brit Hadasha, or the Renewed Covenant, which is also found in the Aramaic Peshitta as hallelujah, which is a call to praise Yah. And it is also not just a call to praise Yah, it is an entire state of mind and being, and a state of existence where we are praising the Eternal One of all creation, the one who gives breath, the one who breathes, the one who is forever. And again, his name is Yahuwah, and this is his eternal name. This is his name forever. No one bestowed this name upon him. This is who he is. And that is what this very name means. He who is, he who breathes, he who exists, the self-sustaining power of all. And his mighty name is Yahuwah, and it is the centerpiece of all of end-time events as well. And so therefore we must understand the name of Yahuwah, for it is being restored, and this is one of the fulfillments of prophecy that people are not even paying attention to, which are happening in this time that we live. And I have been working diligently to proclaim and announce the name of Yahuwah to the people of this world for the last 20 years through Google and YouTube and various means. And over those years, I have been compiling and collecting various information regarding the name of Yahuwah that I have not particularly revealed in videos for various reasons. Rather, I've been compiling this in a book form so that people will have something in their hand that they can share with their loved ones, with their friends and their family, with people who are in academics, with people who are scholars, or people who are rabbis or pastors or teachers or whatever their position is or whatever they think they are, that they may know that we know for sure that the eternal name is Yahuwah, and that this is backed up by academic sources, this is backed up by history, this is backed up by archaeology, this is backed up by simplicity of understanding very basics within the Hebrew Scriptures, such as, again, the universal word hallelujah, which appears in the name of the prophets such as Eliah, who is called in his fuller form, the fuller form of his name is Eliyahu. And Yeshayah, who is Isaiah, is Yeshayahu. Jeremiah, who is Jeremiah, is also called Jeremiyahu. This is the natural progression. Yah, Yahu, Yahuwah. This is the name forever, and we know this with great confidence. And this can be explained, and I will announce the name of the book and its release date very soon. I've been working on it diligently. It's an editing process. There's a lot that needs to be done still. Pray for this work because it will be unlike anything that has been revealed thus far. So it's very important to understand that Yahuwah's name is being restored, and it is the pinnacle of understanding of all things in the Scriptures, starting with Genesis and ending in the book of Revelation. And we are going to demonstrate that here today in this lesson. To understand the importance of the name of Yahuwah, all we must do is understand the prophecy of Yoel or Joel, who is Yahuel, whose very name means Yahuwah is El. In Genesis chapter 2, or in the Hebrew, it is chapter 3. And we read there, وَهَيَا كُلَّ شَيْءٍ يِكْرَى بِشَمْ يَهْوَى يِمَلَتْ, which means, and it shall come to pass that all who call upon the name of Yahuwah shall be saved. And this is quoted in the book of Acts chapter 2 on the day of Shavuot or Pentecost, when a reason is given by Peter or Kepha for the great sign of the speaking in other languages, and all the nations are asking, who are Yahudim and different ones who are coming back to Jerusalem at the time for the pilgrimage feast. And they're like, what is this? Kepha says, this is what was spoken by the prophet Yahuwah, that Yahuwah is going to pour out his Ruach HaKodesh, his spirit, upon his people, and they would nebuah, they would prophesy. And further, he goes on to say this very passage, this is the accumulation, that all who call upon the name of Yahuwah shall be saved. But that word Yimelet means much more than just to be saved. It means to narrowly escape. So therefore, under extreme pressure. And we know that there is going to be the extreme pressure of the tribulation which we are experiencing, that is going to be pressing on the people of Yahuwah in these last days. And the very important part that we must highlight, that is also equally important to calling upon the name in this particular prophecy, is what is stated next. Ki b'har Zion, وبيروشلايم تيا بيلتا كاشر أمر يهوه وبشرديم أشر يهوه كرا, which means, for it shall be in Mount Zion, in Mount Zion, and in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, there shall be an escape for the remnant whom Yahuwah shall call. So we have to understand the power of Har Zion, the mountain of Zion, the mountain of Yahuwah. There's a reason why people all over the world are confused about this term, about Zion and about Zion in these last days. And if people hear you speak of it, they'll be ready to kill you. They don't even understand. They got a mob mentality. They have no clue that Zion is the mountain of the Kodesh one, whose name is to be praised. And this is the location where Yahuwah will fulfill his great redemption that he's promised with his people. And I'm going to prove that here today. In the book of Revelation, Hazon, we go to chapter 7 and start in verse 2. And I saw another Malak, a messenger, coming out from the rising of the sun, holding the seal of the living Elohim. And he cried with a loud voice to the four Malakim, the messengers, to whom it was given to harm the earth and the sea, saying, do not harm the earth, nor the sea, nor the trees, until we have sealed the servants of our Elohim in their foreheads, where they think, where they ponder the very thoughts of their mind. And we know that in the book of Deuteronomy, where we read of the greatest commandment, Yahushua HaMashiach taught us the greatest commandment, is Shema Yisrael, Yahuwah Eloheinu, Yahuwah Echad, Ve'abeta et Yahuwah Eloheka b'kol lebabeka, u'b'kol nefesheka, u'b'kol meodeka, which means Shema, listen and do, hear and do, Yisrael, Yahuwah Elohim, Yahuwah is one, and we shall love Yahuwah our Elohim with all of our heart, with all of our being, and with all of our excess, with all that we are. And this is the great command. And when we read about this great command in context, in the book of Devarim, in Deuteronomy, when we read it in context, it further states that this shall be a sign between your eyes and in your right hand. It will be an otiot. The word otiot also means a miracle, a sign, a wonder. It'll be a wonder in your mind and in your right hand, where you pray, where you think, the things that really make up who you are, those thoughts, even those random wayward thoughts and the different things that you allow your mind to do throughout the day, the inward parts and the feelings and everything that comprise the ultimate who you are, those things that you don't even pay attention to, that really make up the reality of who you are. That's what this is speaking of. And the seal of Yahuwah is what grounds us and keeps us in the state of mind that we must be in. And it must be within our mind, and it must be in our right hand, in our works and what we do. And the binding of Yahuwah upon us, the bringing of his commandments upon us is a sign that that goes counteractive to the mark of the beast. It goes against the mark of the beast. It is the opposite of the mark of the beast. And we read here that this is the seal of the living Elohim. Listen to what it says. It's in their foreheads. And I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 sealed. Out of all the tribes of the children of Yisrael, out of all of the tribes of the children of Yisrael, they have the 144,000 there, right there, sealed with the seal of the everlasting Elohim. And this is powerful to understand, because when you continue to read, you will read that all of the 12 tribes are sealed, 12,000 per tribe, and they are sealed with the seal of the everlasting Elohim. And this is what protects them. This is what guides them. This is what keeps them from the darkness, from the hour of tribulation, the hour of evil, the hour of destruction that is coming. And it preserves them. And what is the seal? For the answer to this, we look no further than the book of Revelation, chapter 14, verse 1. And I looked and saw a lamb standing on Har Zion, on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his father's name written upon their foreheads. Who is the Father? The Father is Yahuwah, the very name of the Messiah of Yisrael. His name, Yahushua, is comprised of the Father's name, Yahuwah, and the word Yeshua, which appears in the Song of the Sea, Exodus chapter 15. Very important to understand these things. The full form, Yahushua, Yod, He, Wah, Shin, Wah, Ayin, is 6 letters. This name means Yahuwah saves. His father is Yahuwah, for he said, I came in my father's name and you did not receive me. I have done all of these works in my father's name. He prayed to the Father and said, Father, I have revealed your name to these men that you gave me in the world. Keep them in your name. And there is only one name, and it is not Adonai, and it is not Kurios, and it is not God, and it is not Lord, it is not Baal. No, it is Yahuwah. And this is the name that will be in the forehead of the 144,000 redeemed. Where? In Mount Zion, the mountain of my Elohim. I don't know who you serve, but I serve Yahuwah. And Har Zion belongs to Yahuwah. And Jerusalem is the land of Yahuwah's great name. He said his name would be there forever. And I'm going to tell you something right now. I pray daily for the shalom of Jerusalem, for the outcast, for the remnant of Yisrael. And this is what we're supposed to do. And this is what you're supposed to be doing. Asking that Yahuwah will have mercy upon his people, Yisrael, that he will gather the remnant of his people who truly keep his commandments and truly walk in his ways and love him with all of their heart, mind, and being, and cleave to him as one people under his Messiah. And this is the truth of the Brit Hadasha. This is the truth of the renewed covenant, the New Testament. And this is the truth that has to be announced, and it has to be understood in these last days. It has to be understood. So now that we've read from Genesis, from Revelation, let's go to Genesis. Genesis, Bereshith, chapter. We're going to start in chapter 48 because we need to read about the children of Yisrael, because there are things that people do not understand, mysteries that must be unlocked and revealed before the time comes into fullness. Listen to what it says. And after these events, it came to be that it was said to Yahusif, Joseph, see, your father is sick, and he took with him his 2 sons, Manasseh, whose name means to forget, and Ephraim, whose name means to be fruitful. And Jacob was told, see, your son Yahusif is coming to you. And Yisrael strengthened himself and sat up on the bed. And Jacob said to Yahusif, El Shaddai, which is a title of Yahuwah. The all-sufficient El is what it means. We know that it is a title of Yahuwah, for Yahuwah is called Yahuwah El Shaddai in the scriptures. He appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and baruch me, or blessed me. and said to me, see, I am making you fruitful. Pay attention to this. Fruitful. Ephraim means fruitful. This is what the son of Joseph's name means. Ephraim. Here we see, he says to Yisrael, El Shaddai, Yahuwah, the Elohim of Yisrael, says, I am making you fruitful and shall increase you and make of you an assembly of people, a multitude of people. Now we know that this is already the case with the patriarchs. Abraham did not just have his son Yitzhak, he also had Yishmael. Yishmael was, of course, born of Hagar. And there was a certain barakah, a certain blessing placed upon Yishmael. But there was a special barakah placed upon Yitzhak. He was going to be the son of promise who was born to Sarah, not the bondwoman, not the concubine, but the wife of Abraham. So therefore, through Sarah comes Yitzhak, which means he laughed. And Yitzhak was the son of the promise. And upon him would rest all these mighty things. And from Yitzhak, he did not only have his son Jacob or Yaakov, who's Israel or Yisrael, he also had Esau. Esau was the firstborn. Esau was born first. Yaakov is named Yaakov because he grabbed the heel of Esau. And then Yaakov wrestles with the messenger of Yahuwah, and he is renamed Yisrael, which means to overcome and to strive with El, which is the story, the people of Yisrael, because they have been striving with this book, striving with this truth for a long time, through the blessings and the curses and everything in between. It's very important to see what we're going to see here in the scriptures. So let's pay close attention. It says that I am making you fruitful and shall increase you and make you an assembly of peoples. So we're not talking about the patriarchs anymore. We're talking about Yisrael is speaking specifically to the children of Yahusef, of Joseph. A special barakah, that from them will come an assembly of people. This is very important to grasp. It is the mystery of mysteries that people don't even see in the scriptures, staring them right in the face. The entire purpose of the Brit Hadasha, the renewed covenant, can be found right in these words that I am now reading to you. Listen carefully. Listen very carefully. I'm going to make you an assembly of people and give this land to your seed after you as an everlasting possession. And now your two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you in the land of Mitzrayim, or Egypt, before I came to you in Mitzrayim, are mine. As Reuben and Shimon, they are mine. Reuben is the firstborn. Your offspring, whom you shall bring forth after them, are yours, and let them be called by the name of their brothers in their inheritance. And I, when I came from Padan, Rachel, or Rachel, died beside me in the land of Canaan on the way, when there was but a little distance to go to Ephrath. And I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem, or Bethlehem. This is the little town that Yahushua was born in, of course, Bethlehem. And this is going to be important, the whole idea of Rachel, in just a moment. Bethlehem, or Bethlehem, means the house of bread. But this is going to be important in another chapter. So we're just going to hold on to that for a moment and continue going. And Yisrael saw Yahusef's sons and said, who are these? And Yahusef said to his father, they are my sons whom Elohim has given me in this place. And he said, please bring them to me and let me barak them. And the eyes of Yisrael were dim with age, and he was unable to see. And he drew near them, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Yisrael said to Yahusef, I had not thought to see your face, but see, Elohim has also shown me your seed. So Yahusef brought them from between his knees, and he bowed down with his face to the earth. And Yahusef took them both, Ephraim with his right hand towards Yisrael's left hand, and Manasseh with his left hand toward Yisrael's right hand, and brought them near him. And Yisrael stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, consciously directing his hands, for Manasseh was the firstborn. So we see that Yisrael crosses his hands consciously, because he is the prophet of Yahuwah, and he is about to make a very important prophecy. So listen to what it happens here. And he Baruch Yahusef and said, the Elohim, before whom my fathers, Abraham and Yitzhak, walked, the Elohim who has fed me all my life long to this day, the Malak, the messenger, who has redeemed me from all evil, Barak the youths. Now I have to pause for a moment here and help you to understand a few things. The messenger that Yisrael wrestled with responded to him in a very peculiar way when he was asked concerning his name. You see, Yisrael asked him, what is your name? And the messenger said, why do you ask about my name, seeing that it is wonderful or marvelous? But see, Israel asked no further, for he understood the meaning of the response. Because immediately he says he had wrestled with Elohim and had lived. He had seen the face of Elohim. This is very important to understand, to comprehend, because Abraham also saw Yahuwah, according to Genesis chapter 18. Yahuwah stood before Abraham. So this is very important. You have to understand. So when Yahuwah reveals his name to Moshe, who's called Moses, at the burning bush, there's a messenger, a Malak there. Most people forget that. They think the bush is speaking. No, there's a Malak, a messenger, it says, is speaking to Moshe, who's called Moses. And it is the messenger who says, Ayah, Asher, Ayah, I am that I am. Moreover, stating to him, I am Yahuwah, the Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, Elohim of Yitzhak, the Elohim of Yaakov. So this is very important to understand. All of this is very important to grasp. It was the messenger of the Brit, is what the scriptures call it. Malak HaBrit, Malak HaPanaim, the messenger of the face. It was this messenger that the book of Devarim or Deuteronomy tells us led the children of Yisrael through the wilderness. For Yahuwah said, I am sending my Malak, my messenger, before your face, and he will lead you into the land. And it's very important to grasp this because there is a blur often between this Malak and Yahuwah. It is called Malak Yahuwah for a reason, because it is this Malak who shows up when the word of Yahuwah, the word Yahuwah, literally the name Yahuwah is the word, by the way, manifests. There's always this messenger that speaks with the prophets, and this is the word, Hadabar, Dabar Yahuwah, which became flesh. For we read in the book of Yahukanan or John that the word was in the beginning and the word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we understand that in the Hebrew, the word dabar means not just a word, but also a manifestation. Just as the Aramaic word miltha means also word and manifestation. Logos, the Greek word, also implies the same thing. This is where the word logo comes from. So the word is also a manifestation, and this word is a messenger, and it speaks on behalf of Yahuwah, the Supreme One, because the scriptures say that Yahuwah did not reveal all of his esteem to Moses when Moses asked, show me all of your esteem. Yahuwah said, no man can see my esteem and live. But what you read in the context, Moses has been speaking to Yahuwah face to face the entire time. It's a mystery that must be understood. So anyway, progressing. Remember this because it's all relevant to our study. Now remember, it says that the messenger will Barak the youths, and let my name be called upon them, and the name of my fathers, Abraham and Yitzhak, and let them increase to a multitude in the midst of the earth. Now here again we see the idea of the multiplicity of the people, that they should become a multitude in the midst of the earth. This is powerful to understand because we continue to see that this is the idea. A multitude of people are coming forth, and a company of nations are rising forth from Ephraim. This is basically what we're seeing in the Hebrew underneath the English. And we're studying this out, and we're seeing that Ephraim means to be fruitful, and Manasseh means to forget. And this must have some kind of correlation with these two tribes, who are half-tribes representing Joseph as a whole. So Joseph is in a way being usurped here, or being incorporated here, with this idea of a split. And the split is something to the effect of fruitfulness and forgetfulness. And this is all important and relevant, and we're going to tie it all in. And when Yahushua saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it was evil in his eyes, and he took hold of his father's hand to remove it from the head of Ephraim to the head of Manasseh. And Yahushua said to his father, "Not so, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head." But his father refused and said, I know, my son. He also becomes a people, and he is also great. And yet his younger brother is greater than he, and his seed is to become the completeness or the fullness of the nations, literally the fullness of the Gentiles. The Hebrew says Hagoyim, the nations, the fullness of the nations. This means that through Ephraim, there will be a multitude of many nations that are going to come forth from him. And through him, there's going to be a fullness of nations, of the nations, speaking of a future redemption where the foreigners and the outside nations are gathered in. And this is very amazing to comprehend because people never think of it. But of course, this makes total sense because these two sons were born in Mitzrayim or Egypt. And Yahushua had taken an Egyptian wife. So these two sons already represent the idea of the coming in of the foreigners, of the strangers, of the sojourners. And this is important to comprehend. But what's really important to understand is that Ephraim is to manifest literally as the fullness of the nations, the fullness of the Goyim, the fullness of the Gentiles. Most people don't even understand that this is revealed right here in the scriptures, but yet it is. And it's the power of understanding this connection with the Brit Hadasha that I'm about to reveal to you. And it's very important to grasp this. Let's continue on. It says that he shall be, it says, yes, and he shall be greater. And through him, through his seed, is to become the completeness of the Goyim, the Gentiles. And he baraked them on that day, saying, "And you, Yisrael, shall barak, saying, Elohim make you as Ephraim and as Manasseh." Thus he put Ephraim before Manasseh, and this barakah is still done today, father to son, still being done to this very day. And Yisrael said to Yahushua, "See, I am dying, but Elohim shall be with you and bring you back to the land of your fathers. And I have given you one portion above your brothers, which I took from the hand of the Amorite with my sword and with my bow." You see how Yahushua is favored. He's given a whole portion above his brothers. He's given this special barakah to his sons that we don't read about the other sons of Israel having, because Joseph, Yahushua, was his father's favorite son. He was given the coat that they say is of many colors. It really means a fancy priestly prince tunic, something that royalty would wear. And so he was given this very nice garment by his father. And the expectation was that he was going to be the one that the Messiah goes through. And it's amazing because his whole story is a picture of the Messiah being sold into slavery, being rejected by his brothers, all these different things, being thrown into the pit, and how he was not recognized by his brothers, just as the Israelites, the Yahudim today, do not recognize Yahushua. But eventually, they will see who he is, because even now, Yahushua is made out to be a Greek or a Roman because of Roman Catholicism and various Orthodox churches, Greek Orthodox churches, all these different places who act as if they have the actual original truth of the Natsrim, of the offshoots of the watchmen, the ones who follow Yahushua HaMashiach, who is called Yahushua HaNatsri. And so this is where all this confusion came in, because Yahushua and the early apostles were all Yahudim. We're called Jewish. The word Yahudi means those who worship Yahuwah. But the so-called church fathers of history are all Gentiles. So that explains to you a lot of what has happened over the years. The Gentiles didn't mind eventually covering up the name of Yahuwah with Kurios, even though the Greek Septuagint originally contained the name of Yahuwah in Paleo-Hebrew, modern Hebrew, and even the short form transliterated as Yahu. And this is a fact. But eventually they would cover it up with Kurios, meaning what? Lord. Just Adonai means Lord. And Baal, the name that Jeremiah says that the people had forgotten his Yahuwah's name through Baal because of their dreams and their visions. This also means what? Lord. and through God, the name of a pagan deity. And what's interesting is Yeshayahu chapter 65:11, that troop in the King James Version, that troop is in the Hebrew God. And the word is spelled Gimel Dalet. No one is disputing the pronunciation in the entire earth. No Hebrew scholar disputes the pronunciation whatsoever. That is without dispute pronounced God. And yet somehow, we think that this was going to go away. The northern Israelites were exiled from their land because of idol worship and worshiping this idol. It was a warning. They were kicked out of their land for that. So we would actually expect to see relics of this with Israelites today even. Of course, we would hope to see Ephraimites, Israelites, waking up in fullness and shedding themselves of this. But why would we be surprised to see sacred trees? Ashrim, when that's the exact thing Yahuwah said they were doing. They had the sacred trees, and they were burning incense on the high hills, and to the idols, and worshiping idols of stone and wood, just like you see all types of religions doing today, namely even the Catholic Church. All these places doing these things that Yahuwah warned against expressly. And these things reveal the truth that Yisrael has maintained some of these terrible abominations and carried them with them to the various lands, and the word God is proof, because they say in etymology, the English word God comes from the Teutonic pagans. Where did they get it from? We know from the scriptures it came from God. And we know, according to the synchronicity of heathen religions, that this is Baal and Zeus and Jupiter and all the same mighty ones that always is, who is the abomination of desolation, all these different things. So surely this is not allowed, but yet we see that it's happening. And we wonder, how did it get to this? And that is because Israelites have become a multitude of nations carrying with them the relics of these lies. This is the truth, and we're going to prove it. But the thing is, it shouldn't be surprising, because Israelites always struggled with doing the right thing. We see that they always, time and time again, that's the story of this entire book, is the struggle. Remember, Yisrael means to overcome with El. It's a struggle for them. The struggle against the idol worship versus worshiping the supreme one, Yahuwah. Surely it shouldn't be, but it is, and this is nonetheless what has taken place. Further, we need to read about the tribes of Yisrael. Genesis 49, continuation of what we're reading. Verse 1, and Yaakov called his sons and said, gather together, so that I declare to you what is to befall you in the last days. Take note, in the last days. Remember that in the back of your mind as we read the rest of these verses. Gather together and hear, you sons of Yaakov, or Jacob, and listen to Yisrael your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my power, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of exaltation, and the excellency of power. Boiling like water, you do not excel, because you went up to your father's bed. Then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. Shimon and Levi are brothers. Their weapons are implements of violence. Let my being not enter their council. Let my esteem not be united in their assembly, because they killed a man in their displeasure, and they lamed an ox in pleasure. Cursed be their displeasure, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I divide them in Yaakov and scatter them in Yisrael. And we know, of course, the Levites are the priests, the Kohanim, and from the Kohanim, they have no inheritance. They're scattered throughout the land according to the Torah. And of course, the tribe of Shimon was also scattered throughout the northern tribes of Ephraim, or Yisrael, the 10 tribes to the north, and also amongst the tribe of Yehudah to the south. Because we know originally there was one united monarchy, okay, just for historical sake, that the kingdom of Israel was a united kingdom of 12 tribes under Saul and under King David and under Solomon. But of course, because Solomon worshipped many mighty ones other than Yahuwah and turned his back from Yahuwah, and his heart wasn't perfect with him all of his days, even though the scriptures do imply there could have been repentance there. The point is that nonetheless, he opened up this door that the kingdom would be divided after his days. And surely it was, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And for a great deal of history, the northern kingdom has never returned. And people call these the lost tribes of Israel. They were exiled by the Assyrians. Just as the Yahudim, the Jews, were also exiled by the Babylonians that we read about in books like Daniel and Ezekiel and Ezra, Nehemiah and Zechariah, about the Babylonian captivity. But of course, they returned and they rebuilt the temple, and the rest is history. But the point is that we want to highlight some things here that are very important, okay? Further, now, it says in verse 8, you, Yahudah, your brothers praise you. Your hand is on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children bow down before you. Now, Yahudah is, of course, Judah, for those who may somehow not know. And Yahudah means to praise Yahuwah according to the very context of the name when it was given to Yahudah by his mother. Okay, so very important to understand that that is what Yahudah means. That it means those who praise Yahuwah. Okay, so further, Yahudah was one of the tribes and became one of the kingdoms, the southern kingdom of Judah. Now, of course, this is why we read in the New Testament, the Brit Hadasha, it refers to the region as Judea, and it talks about the Jews, and it doesn't necessarily say a lot about Ephraim or Israel. That is because they were exiled during those times. They were not necessarily there. Now, there were pieces, and we can show you that in Scripture, pieces of the population that had come back, okay? Small numbers, but not in the way that the Scriptures tell us it would happen in the latter days. So keep this in mind. So, Yahudah, your brothers praise you. Your hand is on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children bow down before you. Yahudah is a lion's cub from the prey. You have gone up, my son. He bowed down. He crouched like a lion. And like a lion, who does rouse him? The scepter shall not turn aside from Yahudah, nor an inscriber from between his feet until Shiloh comes, and to him is the obedience of the people. Now, let's break this down. Because it says the scepter shall not turn aside from Yahudah, meaning the monarchy, of course, that of David, the eternal monarchy, the lineage that comes forth from King David, from David. Yahuwah has said that through him would come one that he would call his son, and that this one would sit and rule on the throne of David forever and ever and ever. And this is, of course, is Mashiach. The word Mashiach means anointed, the one who is anointed with the Kodesh oil to be the king over Yisrael. This is what it's referring to here when it talks about the scepter. And we read about this in Acts chapter 2, when it says that the nations, the Gentiles, will try to tear off the ropes and the bonds that Yahuwah has placed upon them, that he will laugh at them, saying, I have set my Mashiach on Har Zion, on my mountain, and I inscribe for a law. And then he gives them, he tells him to break them with a rod of iron. This is the scepter, and dash them to pieces like a potter's vessel. Very important to comprehend all this. But this part says, nor an inscriber from between his feet until Shiloh comes. And here Shiloh is talking about the second coming of Mashiach as the ruling, conquering lion of Yahudah. And we know that because the context, again, is what will befall them in the latter days. And it says, and to him is the obedience of the people. The people will be beaten into subjection and must obey him. That is what will transpire. So, an inscriber, though, is one who scribes the Torah. So therefore, we have to understand that the Yahudim to this day, the Jews to this day, are still scribing the Torah in the Hebrew language, in Ibrit. And this is very important because this has never stopped. And we see that this is the case for centuries. And there are no other people who have been scribing the Torah in Hebrew and carrying it around in Torah scrolls and having it ripped from their hands and burned and go through all the persecution and humiliation that the world has put the Yahudim through for carrying the Torah. And people say, well, yeah, but they keep the Talmud. Well, yeah, of course, they would have something like a commentary that they go by that would be historically old, that defines all these extra traditions that they had added to the text that we read about in the Brit Hadasha. We know that the Pharisees had done all these extra traditions and added these things. So to find a written record amongst them of these very traditions, which are validated in the text from the first century, proves further who they are. But people can't hear it because there's this hatred and this venom and this disgusting filth that we see rising up in these last days. And instead of praying for the remnant of Yisrael and praying for the remnant of Yahudah and praying for Yahuwah's people and praying to make Yerushalayim a place of shalom in truth, that Yahuwah shalom shall reign over all, is not what is happening. Instead, people are full of envy and strife and hatred, and they hate the Yahudim and they hate Yisrael. So they're all fake, as if they know that every single one of them are fake, like they've done some kind of background check, some kind of genealogy on every single individual, and as if they know the truth. And there's so much that could be said here, but I'm not going to go into all of it for time's sake. I'm going to allow the scriptures to just prove themselves. But the point here is it says literally, right here in the text, the one who's scribing the Torah is not going to go anywhere. Even in the last days, they're going to still be writing the Torah. So while you imagine that you are somehow more Jewish than those people who are scribing the Torah and whose great-great-great-great-grandfathers were doing so and teaching them the Hebrew language, which you are now learning on some, YouTube platform or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? But I'm saying just don't be so prideful in yourself, because it's not about your flesh. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. A very important passage to reveal this to people, to stop being so haughty, stop being so venomous, and to realize that we should be praying for the peace of Yerushalayim, praying for Yahuwah's people, and praying for the Yahudim, praying for those who carry the Torah. Most of these people that pretend they're Yahudim are not. These people in these last days, they've never even seen a Torah scroll. They couldn't read from it for sure if they could see it. They don't wear tzitzits. They don't know the 10 Commandments. They don't even know the Shema. Ask them the 10 Commandments next time. Ask them the Shema. Ask them any of these. They don't know the basics. And yet they're running around haughty, prideful, full of lies, when they don't even have the genealogies. They don't even have the history. They don't have anything to back anything up. Just lies and deception. And there's going to be so much of this deception in these last days because the wheat and the tares grow up together. And that's the mystery that people need to realize. That's what's going on. The wheat, its head becomes full of grain, so it bows over. But the tare changes its color. Initially, they're the same color, right? But as maturity takes place, the wheat becomes golden. And this is important, because the golden grain of Yahuwah's word and all of the pictures that are there, but the proud tare stands upright and becomes darkened and full of these disgusting seeds that are poisonous if you eat them. Just like the fruit of the people that we see. And what are the role of the tares? It's a weed. It's robbing the nutrients, robbing the life force out of the grain. There's a separation taking place. Just letting you know, there's a separation taking place. Further, we read about the Mashiach binding his donkey to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He washed his garments in wine and his robes in the blood of grapes, which we read about in Isaiah, YHWH 63, when Yahushua the Messiah trods down the winepress of the fierceness of the wrath of Yahuwah. And this is also mentioned in the book of Revelation. So these things are very important to understand. It says, his eyes are darker than wine and his teeth whiter than milk. Zebulun dwells at the seashore. He is for a haven for ships, and his border is unto Sidon. So this is a barakah. You see, barakoth. These are the barakoth. People are saying, well, we should be looking for curses. But think about Daniel. Daniel was under the curse, so to speak, because he was carried off to Babel. But because of the barakah of Yahuwah, he rose to the top, the second in command under 3 heathen kings, because the ruach of Yahuwah was inside of him. So we're not looking for cursing all the time. We're looking for the barakah. We're looking for the barakah of Yahuwah in the last days, is what the scriptures say, literally. So further, Yissachar is a strong donkey lying down between 2 burdens. He saw that a resting place was good and that the land was pleasant, and he inclined his shoulder to bear a burden and became subject to slave labor. Dan rightly rules his people as one of the tribes of Yisrael. Dan is a serpent by the way, an adder by the path, that bites the horse's heels, so that its riders fall backwards. I have waited for your deliverance, O Yahuwah. The word deliverance there is Yeshua. And so there, if you look at the Hebrew clearly, there's the combination, Yahuwah and Yeshua, just like we see in the Song of the Sea with Yah and Yeshua. And so therefore, this is the revelation of Yahushua's name here embedded in the Barakah. So it's a very important thing to note. And then further, it says, Gad, a raiding band raids him, but he raids its heel. Bread from Asher is rich, and he gives delicacies of a sovereign. This is Asher in the last days. He's giving delicacies of a sovereign. Okay, so those people are constantly talking about cursing. Have you ever considered these verses and what we're reading here? This is ridiculous, but this is beautiful for those of us who see the truth. Naphtali is a deer let loose. He gives words of elegance. Yahusuf, or Joseph, is an offshoot of a fruit-bearing tree, an offshoot of a fruit-bearing tree by a fountain. His branches run over a wall. And the archers have bitterly grieved him and shot at him and hated him. But his bow remained in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty one of Yaakov. And there is the shepherd, the stone of Yisrael. Interesting that the stone of Yisrael is being associated with Joseph here, with Yahusuf and his descendants. That's interesting because we know the Messiah came through Yahudah. So what is the message here? And we're going to see, because Yahusuf, Joseph, the people of Yahusuf, Ephraim, who is fruitful, and Manasseh, which means to forget, they are those who would become Natsrim, the students of Yahushua, offshoots, the watchmen. We're going to read about this, and they will be called Gentiles by many people. So we're going to read this in a moment, but they are going to identify with the shepherd, the stone of Yisrael. From the El of your father who helps you, and the Almighty who baraks you, with the Barakoth of the heavens from above, Barakoth of the deep that lie beneath, Barakoth of the breast and the womb, the Barakoth of your father have excelled the blessings of my ancestors up to the limit of the everlasting hills. They are on the head of Yahusuf, on Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him who was separated from his brothers. And what's fascinating is Joseph, or Yahusuf, represents Israel as a whole, the northern tribes that are often called Ephraim, after the son of Joseph. They were exiled, never to return, cut off and unrecognizable, just as Joseph was seen as an Egyptian. Now, when you would see an Israelite in those times, in various times through history, as they have been exiled from the land, people would see a Gentile. And we're going to prove that in just a moment, very easily in the scriptures. But we already basically have, because through Ephraim we saw the fullness of the Gentiles, and that his name means to multiply, and he would become a multitude in the midst of the earth, filling the earth. So this is very important to understand, very powerful. And further, we must go onward. And it says, and there is so much that we could read here, but it says here, that the barakah of your father have excelled the blessings, or the barakoth of my ancestors, up to the limit of the everlasting hills. More is said about Yahusuf than anyone else. They are on the head of Yahusuf, and on the crown of the head of him who is separated from his brothers. Benjamin, or Benjamin, is a wolf that tears. In the morning he eats prey, and at night he divides the spoil. All these are the 12 tribes of Yisrael, and this is what their father spoke to them, and he baruched them, and he baruched each one according to his own barakah. This is very important to see. And what was the context? Let us remember. It said, and Jacob called the sons and said, gather together so that I declare to you what is to befall you in the latter days. So this is powerful information that we must digest and comprehend, because there is a lot that has been said about the subject, but there is very little effort put into actually understanding the topic, because people have their own agendas. So therefore, let us go to Deuteronomy chapter 4, and we're going to start in verse 23. Guard yourselves, lest you forget the covenant of Yahuwah, your Elohim, which he made with you, and shall make for yourselves a carved image in any form. Of course, they did. This is a prophecy given by Yahuwah through Moses. As Yahuwah, your Elohim, has commanded you. For Yahuwah, your Elohim, is a consuming fire, a jealous El Kana. It means he's impassioned. His love is fiery. He is full of the flame of love for his devoted worshipers, and he will not allow for idolatry or adultery to break his covenant. He will consume that person in his rage. When you bring forth children and grandchildren, you shall grow old in the land. This is before they've even entered. This is a prophecy of what will happen. And shall do corruptly and make a carved image in the form of whatever, and shall do what is evil in the eyes of Yahuwah your Elohim to provoke him. I shall call the heavens and earth to witness against you on that day, that you shall soon completely perish from the land which you pass over the Jordan to possess. You do not prolong your days in it, but are completely destroyed. And Yahuwah shall scatter you amongst the people, and you shall be left few in number amongst the nations where Yahuwah drives you. And there you shall serve mighty ones, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see nor hear nor eat nor smell. But from there you shall seek Yahuwah your Elohim and shall find, when you search for him with all of your heart and with all of your being. It's about the inward parts. It's about seeking Yahuwah with the inward parts. This is how Yahuwah is raising up the tribes of Jacob, the so-called lost tribes in these last days, and restoring the remnant of Yisrael. It's happening prophetically through the Ruach HaKodesh, through the inhabitant, through the habitation of Yahuwah inside of his people. And this is how he is leading them, through the heart and through the mind, through the inward parts, because that is where he is writing his covenant. And we're going to read about this in just a moment. But this is important. We seek Yahuwah with all of our heart and with all of our mind, not just pretending to, not just barely holding the focus, not just giving a small amount of time, but devoting our life to seeking Yahuwah, not just a day, not just a moment, but our entire essence before we open our eyes, when we open our eyes, when we wake up, as we walk by the way, when we lie down, we Shema, which means hear, listen, and do. Yisrael, Yahuwah, our Elohim, Yahuwah is one. Shema Yisrael, Yahuwah, Eloheinu, Yahuwah Echad. Hallelujah. And further, it states in the greatest command, according to Yahushua HaMashiach, Yahushua the Messiah, HaNatsrim. According to him, this is the greatest command. And it further says, Wa'abeta et Yahuwah Eloheka b'kol lebabeka, u'b'kol nefesheka, u'b'kol meodeka, which means, and you shall love Yahuwah your Elohim with all of your heart, with all of your mind and all of your strength. And we know that this is the revelation of all things, the great command. Hallelujah. We have to seek him with all of our heart. Listen what it says, verse 30. In your distress, in your tribulation is what most versions read. In your tribulation, in your distress, when all these words shall come upon you in the latter days, then you shall return to Yahuwah your Elohim and shall obey his voice. Yahuwah is revealing that the children of Ephraim, and not just them, but also the Yahudim went through the same experience, but that Ephraim specifically would become the fullness of the nations because they would become what people called the nations, the Goyim, a multitude and an assembly of them. And we read about the Barakoth that were placed upon them, and there's many more that we could talk about, but for time's sake, I'm trying to hit the most important parts for this study. In your tribulation, when all these words shall come upon you in the latter days, then you shall return to Yahuwah your Elohim and shall obey his voice. For Yahuwah your Elohim is a compassionate El. He does not forsake you, nor destroy you, nor forget the covenant of your fathers, which he swore to them. For ask now of the days that are past, which were before you, since the day that Elohim created man on the earth, and ask from one end of the heavens to the other end of the heavens, whether there has ever been a word as great as this, or has been heard like it. Has a people heard the voice of Elohim speaking out of the midst of the fire, as you have heard, and live? And we know that the Israelites, over 1 million people, heard the voice of Yahuwah on that day. And now we know that we hear that same eternal voice, the voice that spoke from the fire, the one who speaks to the hearts and minds through the inward parts of his people, and who leads them and guides them and directs them in the path that they should go in. And when they go this way or that way, they have no fear, for they know that Yahuwah is with them. For they shall hear a voice from behind saying, this is the way you should go in, and they will walk walk in it because they are connected with Yahuwah. And that is what this whole thing is about. Yahuwah is raising up for himself a people in these last days. And if we go further into Devarim, into chapter 31, we read that Yahuwah tells Moses, he says, I know when these people go into the land, they are going to turn away from me and worship idols and things that provoke me. So therefore, put this song in their mouth. This is what it says. Listen to this. And it shall be when many evils and distresses, verse 21, when many evils and tribulation come upon them, that this song shall answer before them as a witness. For it is not to be forgotten in the mouths of their seed. For I know their thoughts which they are forming today, even before I bring them to the land of which I swore to give them. And Moshe wrote this song the same day and taught it to the children of Israel. It was never to depart from their mouth. And guess what? The Yahudim are the only people today who are still chanting this song. It is part of the Torah portion, but people hate the Jews. And so do you probably, because so many do. And so there's a good chance that someone who's found their way here wants to spread this hate also. And you think I don't understand that there is an Illuminati and there's a satanic agenda and there are certain Israelites involved? That's the history of Scripture. Have you not read what they did on the high hills? They sacrificed their children to Molech, for crying out loud. They worshipped idols of wood and stone and did all kinds of sick, evil, wicked perversions. We read about it in our own scriptures. Cannibalism. You can read it. Just read about it in 1st through 2nd Kings, 1st through 2nd Chronicles. So when you're looking for a perfect people, maybe you should be looking for that perfect people, but that is a remnant, my friend. That is a remnant. That's not the majority in these last days. Please understand the scriptures. Pray for the remnant. Pray for Yahuwah's people. There's a remnant. You need to understand this. You need to call on his name and beg for his mercy and pray that he will make Yerushalayim a place of shalom. And not just a fake shalom. Not just some political peace. I'm not talking about some new world order situation. I'm talking about Mashiach Yahushua ruling and reigning, the Messiah ruling and reigning. So this song, I'm not going to read it all, but you definitely should. Oh, you definitely need to. You definitely should. I pray that you will study it, memorize it, study it often. Remember the history, because this reveals the whole history summed up. Read this chapter if you want to understand the abominations. We're going to read a little bit here. Listen to this. It said, but Yeshurun grew fat and kicked. You grew fat, you grew thick. You were covered with fat. So he forsook Eloah, who made him. So Yisrael is going to forsake Yahuwah. That's what they did, at least, already. This was prophetically written before they even did. But listen, and scorned the rock of his deliverance. They moved him to jealousy with foreign matters. With abominations they provoked him. They slaughtered to demons, not Eloah. Mighty ones that they did not know. New ones that came up lately, which your fathers did not fear. You neglected the rock who brought you forth, and forgot the El who fathered you. And Yahuwah saw and despised because of the provocation of his sons and daughters. And he said, let me hide my face from them. Let me see what their end is. For they are perverse generation, children, in whom there is no trusting. They made me jealous by what is not El. They provoked me with their worthless matters. But I make them jealous by those who are not a people. So therefore, now you understand the foolishness of these people who are not a people. Listen to what it says. I provoke them with a foolish nation. And you see these foolish people right now today pretending that they're Jews. I'm the Jews. They don't have circumcision. They don't know Hebrew. They don't know anything. They're pretending all this stuff is all in their mind. Look, you think I'm making fun of people? No, I'm bringing the light in the darkness. The truth must be revealed. People are like, well, those Jews are converts. And you think the Torah does not open up the door for converts? The Torah explicitly says that the native shall be as the sojourner and the stranger. There's one Torah for all. But people want to get off on these things instead of worrying about yourself, worrying about your heart, worrying about your mind, and seeking the Almighty on behalf of the remnant of Yahuwah's people. Sure, you can call evil, evil. But you also must call truth, truth, and righteousness must be righteousness. And it all must line up perfectly. You don't have time for erring in this. Listen, it says he's going to provoke them. So that explains the tares. All these people who are springing up, who don't bear actual fruit, who don't have the weight of the grain bowing them down, and they're seeking Yahuwah in truth, in the secret chambers, in reality, when no one's watching them, but they pretend because they learn certain lingos on the internet, and they learn certain Hebrew words, and they pretend, and it's all a facade. Yahuwah knows, and it's all going to be revealed. He said that he would provoke his people with a people who are not even a people. He says, for a fire was kindled in my wrath, and it burns down to the bottom of Sheol and consumes the earth in its increase and sets on fire the mountains. And Yahuwah goes on to say how he is going to judge his people. And when he finally sees that they have no strength left, it says, when their power is gone, in verse 36, that he shall say, where are those mighty ones that you had, that you sought refuge in? Where are those ones that you were slaughtering to? This is me paraphrasing. In verse 39, it says, see now, you'll know that I am he. I am Huah. I am who. This word, who, in Hebrew means he. The full form in the Dead Sea Scrolls is Huah. We know this. It points to Yahuwah's name. But listen to what happens in verse 43. O nations, acclaim his people, for he avenges the blood of his servants and returns vengeance to his adversaries and shall pardon his land and his people. So this is the whole concept, is forgiveness and turning back to his people, Yisrael, once again. Now, we need to go over to Ezekiel chapter 36, and you should read chapter 36 and chapter 37 because it talks about the redemption. And of course, you have to know that the redemption happens in phases, and this can be proven in the scriptures, but it takes a lot of scripture to go through all the information. So we're not going to set out to prove all of that just here today. But what we do want to look at is Ezekiel, chapter 36, and we'll go to verse 17. Son of man, when the house of Yisrael dwelt in their own land, they defiled it by their own ways and deeds. To me, their way was like the uncleanness of a woman in her monthly period. Now, this is talking about Ephraim, the northern tribes of Yisrael. So I poured out my wrath on them for the blood that they had shed on the land, and for the idols they defiled it. And I scattered them amongst the nations, the Goyim, and they were dispersed throughout the lands. I have judged them according to their ways and their deeds. And when they came to the nations, wherever they went, they profaned my set-apart name. For it was said of them, these are the people of Yahuwah, and yet they have gone out of his land. But I had compassion on my set-apart name. Listen carefully. Which the house of Yisrael had profaned amongst the nations, the Goyim, wherever they went. Therefore, say to the house of Yisrael, thus said the Master Yahuwah, I do not do this for your sake, O Yisrael. This is what you need to understand. I do not do this for your sake. What's the key? But for my set-apart name's sake. That's the key. That's the key of the scriptures here. I'm not doing it for your sake, Yahuwah says. I'm doing it when you turn back to me with all your heart, soul, and mind. It's not about your flesh. You better get your heart on me, Yahuwah says, with all of your heart, soul, and mind. Then you'll find me in that day, in the latter days. And then it goes on to say this, as we see here very clearly, that he has compassion on his set-apart name, which the house of Israel had profaned amongst the nations wherever they went. Therefore, say to the house of Israel, thus said the Master Yahuwah, I do not do this for your sake, O house of Israel, but for my set-apart name's sake, which you have profaned amongst the nations wherever you went. And I shall set apart my great name, which has been profaned amongst the nations, which you have profaned in their midst, and the nations, the Gentiles, the Goyim, shall know that I am Yahuwah. Now remember this in the context of the fullness of the nations, the Gentiles, as we were reading earlier, because we're going somewhere with all of this. The nations shall know that I am Yahuwah, declares the Master Yahuwah, when I am set apart in you before their eyes. That's powerful. The Goyim, the Gentiles, will know that Yahuwah is when they see him set apart in you. That's the power of this. It's you. You're the one that has to have Yahuwah's word in your heart. You're the one that has to be led by his Ruach HaKodesh. This is what this is all saying. And I shall take you from amongst the nations, and I shall gather you out of all the lands, and shall bring you into your own land. And I shall sprinkle clean water on you, and you shall be clean from all your filthiness, and from all your idols I cleanse you. And I shall give you a new heart, and put a new spirit within you. And I shall take the heart of stone out of your flesh, and shall give you a heart of flesh, and put my ruach, my spirit, within you, and shall cause you to walk in my laws and guard my right rulings, and shall do them. So that's the point of the Ruach HaKodesh, to keep the commandments, that you will want to keep the commandments. This is the entire purpose of the commandments, so that the Ruach HaKodesh will tell you and lead you and guide you, so that you will spontaneously from the inside, from your innermost depths, your innermost heart and your innermost thoughts, desire with all that you are to truly obey these words of Yahuwah. And you shall dwell in the land that I gave to your fathers, and you shall be my people, and I shall be your Elohim. So there's so much here to read, and you could continue reading. This is a very powerful passage. And if you go on to chapter 37, we talk about the fullness of the completion of the ingathering of Israel. And in verse 16, of course, it says, and you, son of man, take a stick for yourself and write on it for Yahudah or Judah, for the children of Yisrael, his companions. Then take another stick and write on it for Yahuseph or Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, the fruitful one, remember? And for all the house of Yisrael, his companions. And then bring them together for yourself into one stick, and they shall become one in your hand. And it goes on to say that this is because Yahuwah is going to bring his people back to them, and that they will keep the commandments and live. Listen to what it says. In verse 23, and they shall no longer defile themselves with their idols, nor with their disgusting matters, nor with any of their transgressions. And I shall save them from all their dwelling places in which they have sinned. And I shall cleanse them, and they shall be my people, and I shall be their Elohim. While Dawid, the word Dawid means beloved, my servant, speaking of Yahushua HaMashiach, who comes from the loins of Dawid, who is the son of Yahuwah, is sovereign over them all, and they shall all have one shepherd, and walk in my right rulings, and guard my laws, and shall do them. And they shall dwell in the land that I have given to Yaakov my servant, where your fathers dwelt, and they shall dwell in it, and they and their children and their children's children forever, and my servant David be their prince forever. And I shall make a covenant of peace, of shalom with them, an everlasting covenant. It is with them, and I shall place them and increase them, and shall place my set apart place in their midst forever. And my dwelling place shall be over them, and I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. And the nations, the Goyim, the Gentiles shall know that I, Yahuwah, am setting Yisrael apart, when my set apart place is in their midst. So Yahuwah is going to call back his people, and he's going to return them, the outcasts of Yisrael. And this is how it happens, from the inward parts. And now we want to go over to Jeremiah, so that we can understand the Brit Hadasha, the renewed covenant, what is called the New Testament. Because the book of Hebrews chapter 8 quotes Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 31 through 34, and explains that this is the covenant made with Yahudah and Yisrael, the renewed covenant through Mashiach. But listen to what it says in the entire chapter of Jeremiah, chapter 31, starting in verse 1. And at that time declares Yahuwah, I shall be the Elohim of all the clans of Yisrael, and they shall be my people. Thus said Yahuwah, a people escaped from the sword, found favor in the wilderness. Yisrael, when it came to find rest. You can read about this in the book of Revelation. Yahuwah appeared to me from afar, saying, I have loved you with an everlasting love. Remember, Yahuwah's name is jealous, territorial. He is impassioned. His name is great and wonderful. Therefore, he is the idea of love. With an everlasting love. Therefore, I shall draw you with loving commitment. I am going to build you again, and you shall be rebuilt, O maiden of Yisrael. Again, you shall take up your tambourines and go forth in the dance of those who rejoice. Again, you shall plant vines on the mountains of Shomeron. The planters shall plant and treat them as common. For there shall be a day when the watchman, the word is Natsar, the same word that gives us Natsri in Yahushua HaNatsri, the same word that is Natsrim, which is translated Nazarene, where it says, for instance, that Paul or Shaul was a ringleader in the sect of the Natsrim in the book of Acts. So this is very important because Natsrim will cry on Mount Ephraim, which is the mountain of Ephraim, the tribe, the half tribe, which means to be fruitful. Remember, he was going to become a multitude of nations, of goyim even, losing his identity, wandering around, bowing down to idols of stone and wood, and doing all these things until the end times when suddenly he remembers that he should call on his father Yahuwah and seek him with all of his heart, soul, and mind. And listen to what it says, that they shall cry on Mount Ephraim. So the Nazarenes are the Ephraimites. We know this. This is true because the Nazarenes received the message. The Ephraim and Manasseh have received this message. They've been struggling with it, and they haven't been keeping it properly, but they received it as soon as the scriptures went forth. We read about it all throughout the entire Brit Hadasha. So we're going to talk about that in just a moment, but listen to what it says. It says, they will say, arise and let us go up to Zion, to Yahuwah our Elohim. Now this is important because, of course, they're going to Zion. They're Natsrim from Ephraim. They're going in the latter days to announce that they're going to Zion. Why? Because the Ephraimites used to whore after mighty ones, because Jeroboam set up golden calves, and they worshiped those calves, and they did all kinds of things in the northern region. And as a nation, they would not come down as a whole down to the temple of Yahuwah. And so for this reason, this is very important, because now the Ephraimites are going to say, now let us go to Zion, to the mountain of Yahuwah. Listen to what it says. For thus said Yahuwah, sing with gladness for Yaakov, and shout among the chief of the nations, cry out, give praise and say, O Yahuwah, save your people, the remnant of Yisrael. See, this is what we should be saying. This is what we should be praying. See, I am bringing them from the land of the north. Read that very carefully. We see 6 times in Yirmiyahu alone, the land of the north. All you have to do is look at a map. You can see what's to the north. We know that Joseph, who is called Josephus, Flavius, the historian, tells us that the so-called lost tribes were just above the river Euphrates in his day, and they were not lost. They knew exactly where they were. And many Jews and Yahudim have told us for many years where they are, and it is no secret, no mystery that they have inhabited mostly Western countries. And this can be proven without argumentation. We don't have to argue. All we have to do is look at the Brit Hadasha, and we'll see it, and we'll look at it in just a moment. But listen carefully and see where this is going. It says, see, I am bringing them from the land of the north, and shall gather them from the ends of the earth. Among them the blind and the lame, those with child and those in labor, together a great assembly returning here. With weeping they shall come, and with their prayers I shall bring them. See, it's about the heart, mind, and inward parts. Through their prayers I will bring them. I shall make them walk by rivers of waters, in a straight way which they do not stumble. For I shall be a father to Yisrael, and Ephraim is my firstborn. And Yirmiyahu is saying this while Ephraim is no longer in the land. They're gone. They've been gone. They have been kicked out. And we know they were called the Beit Kumri, the house of Omri. And we know they began to be called Kumarians and Scythians and different types of people. And this is all recorded in the Brit Hadasha, the renewed covenant. And we could go through extreme lengths to prove this, but I'm trying to give you an overall summary of what this is all about. Listen how this is now building up to the conversation of the new covenant. We're now talking about Ephraim, who is absent at this time, but they are my firstborn, is what Yahuwah says. Hear the word of Yahuwah, O Goyim. See? Ephraim's the fullness of the nations. Now we're talking about the goyim, the nations, the Gentiles. And declare in the isles afar off, and say, he who scattered Yisrael gathers him, and shall guard him as a shepherd his flock. For Yahuwah shall ransom Jacob, and redeem him from the hand of one stronger than he. And they shall come in, and shall sing on the height of Zion, and stream to the goodness of Yahuwah for grain, and for new wine, and for oil, and for the young of the flock and the herd. And their being shall be like a well-watered garden, and never languish again. Then shall a maiden rejoice, and a dance, and young men and old together. And I shall turn their mourning to joy, and shall comfort them, and shall make them rejoice from their sorrow, and shall fill the being of the priest with fatness, and my people shall be satisfied with goodness, declares Yahuwah. Thus said Yahuwah, a voice was heard in Ramah, wailing, bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted for her children, because they are no more. Now remember earlier I told you to remember that when Israel Israel gave the barakah over his children, and he made reference over Ephraim and Manasseh. He made reference to Rachel. The importance here is that the word Rachel, the name Rachel, means a lamb. And Rachel was, of course, Jacob's favorite wife. It was the one that he originally wanted to marry before he was tricked by his father-in-law, Laban. So this is very important. And Rachel died giving birth to the son that she named Ben Omni, which means son of my sorrow. But of course, Yisrael renamed him to Ben Yamin, which means the son of my right hand, a picture of the Messiah. Of course, we read about the suffering of the Messiah in the scriptures. We know about this in YHWH chapter 53, for instance, a favorite passage of many people. We know that he was beaten for our crookedness, that our sins were laid upon him. All these things are recorded, so you can go and read them when you have an opportunity. It's very beautiful. And of course, we know that the son of the right hand is a picture of Tehillim chapter 110, Psalm chapter 110, where Yahuwah says to my master, come and sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet, and you shall dash them with a rod of iron. This is the scepter that does not depart from Yahudah. So this is important to understand all these things in their proper context, okay? So Rachel is mentioned here for this reason, a picture of the Messiah. It's embedded here for this reason. Thus said Yahuwah, hold back your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for there is a reward for your work, declares Yahuwah, and they shall return from the land of the enemy. And there is expectancy for your latter end, declares Yahuwah, and your children shall return to their own country. I have clearly heard Ephraim lamenting. You have chastised me, and I was chastised. Like an untrained calf, turn me back, and I shall turn back. For you are Yahuwah, my Elohim. See, they'll seek Yahuwah in the latter days, and they'll find him when they search for him with their heart, soul, and mind. And this is Ephraim seeking Yahuwah in the latter days, and Yahuwah acknowledging that they are turning back to him. For after my turning back, I repented, and after I was instructed, I struck myself on the thigh. I was ashamed, even humiliated, for I bore the reproach of my youth. Is Ephraim a precious son to me, a child of delights? For though I spoke against him, I still remembered him. That is why my affections were deeply moved for him. I have great compassion for him, declares Yahuwah. Set up signposts, make landmarks, set your heart towards the highway, the way in which you went. Turn back, O maiden of Yisrael, and turn back to these cities of yours. To when would you turn here and there, O backsliding daughter? For Yahuwah has created what is new on the earth. A woman encompasses a man. Thus said Yahuwah Zevaot, the Elohim of Yisrael. Let them once again say this word in the land of Yahudah and its cities, when I turn back their captivity. Yahuwah barak you, O home of righteousness, mountain of set apartness, and in Yahudah and all its cities, farmers and those who journey with flocks shall dwell together. For I shall fill the weary being, and I shall replenish every grieved being. At this I awoke, and I looked around, and my sleep was sweet to me. See, the days are coming, declares Yahuwah, that I shall sow the house of Yisrael and the house of Yahudah with the seed of man and the seed of beast. Now let's skip on down to verse 31. See, the days are coming. This is exactly quoted in Hebrews chapter 8. See, the days are coming, declares Yahuwah, when I shall make a renewed covenant of Brit Hadasha. And what have we been talking about the entire time? The repentance of Ephraim, the so-called lost tribes, who are just scattered tribes. They're not lost. The Brit Hadasha revealed where they were, who they were, and how they should be reached through Yahushua, the Messiah. And I'm going to explain this in just a moment further, but just see what we're saying here. See, the days are coming, declares Yahuwah, when I shall make a Brit Hadasha, a renewed covenant with the house of Yisrael and with the house of Yahudah. And the nations are not mentioned here. Why? Because through Yisrael, which is called Ephraim, the fullness of the nations would take place automatically. This has already been planned out. It's already been laid out from of old. It's been transcribed in the Torah. It's a part of the entire essence of the covenant. So listen, it says that it is a covenant with the house of Yisrael and with the house of Yahudah. So this is the renewed covenant through Yahushua HaMashiach. not like the covenant I made with their fathers in the day when I strengthened their hand to bring them out of the land of Mitzrayim, my covenant which they broke, though I was a husband to them, declares Yahuwah. For this is the covenant I shall make with the house of Yisrael after those days, declares Yahuwah. I shall put my Torah in their inward parts and write it on their hearts, and I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. And no longer shall they teach each one his neighbor and each one his brother, saying, Know Yahuwah, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, declares Yahuwah, for I shall forgive their crookedness and remember their sin no more. So the entire point of the Brit Hadasha is to know Yahuwah. So those who pretend they are in the new covenant, but do not know Yahuwah and do not have the Torah of Yahuwah, the commandments of Yahuwah written in their heart, they are not full of the Ruach HaKodesh, because we read earlier that the new spirit, which is Yahuwah's spirit, in the book of Ezekiel chapter 36, would give them a new heart, a new spirit, so they'll keep my commandments. And here we see the same thing, that Yahuwah is going to write his commandments, his Torah, in their hearts and in their inward parts, so that they want to fulfill it. So they are being led, not for their sake, but for the sake of Yahuwah. Remember, Yahuwah said, it's not for your sake, O house of Yisrael, but for my Kodesh namesake, for my set-apart namesake. This is why Yahuwah is doing these works. This is very important. Verse 35, thus said Yahuwah, who gives the sun for a light by day and the laws of the moon and the stars for a light by night, who stirs up the sea and its waves roar, Yahuwah of hosts is his name. If these laws vanish from before me, declares Yahuwah, then the seed of Yisrael shall also cease from being a nation before me forever. And we could continue on reading there, but the point has been made crystal clear that Yahuwah sent his people out into the world for breaking his commandments, for disobeying his voice. But because of this, and because they were exiled, through their redemption, other foreign nations will come to Yahuwah through his redemptive power, through the Brit Hadasha, the renewed covenant, and the spirit of Yahuwah being placed within his people, and the Torah being written in the heart. That this is the manifestation. Now, when we read in YHWH chapter 56, we read this. Listen to this in verse 6, and you should read the whole chapter because there's a lot more to read, but for time's sake, it says, also the sons of the foreigner who join themselves to Yahuwah to serve him and to love the name of Yahuwah, to be his servants, all who guard the Sabbath and not profane it and are holding on to my covenant, them I shall bring to my set-apart mountain and let them rejoice in my house of prayer. Their ascending offerings and their slaughter offerings are accepted on my slaughter place, for my house is called a house of prayer for all the people. The Master Yahuwah, who gathers the outcasts of Yisrael, declares, I gather still others to him besides those who are gathered to him, speaking of the nations. So therefore we know that the nations who love Yahuwah's name and guard the Sabbath and guard the Brit Hadasha and have the renewed covenant and understand the truth through the indwelling of the Ruach HaKodesh, through the empowerment of Yahuwah's own spirit, that they can and will be saved, and they are one people in Yahuwah's hand. The foreigner, the stranger, and the native born, all, there is one Torah, and there shall be one people, because through Ephraim came forth the fullness of the nations. Now, I want to examine a couple of passages briefly here. In the book of Yahuchanan, chapter 7, starting in verse 34, this is Yahushua, and he is speaking. He says, you shall seek me, and you shall not be able to find me, and where I am, you are unable to come. The Yahudim, that is the Jews that were around, therefore said to themselves, where is he about to go that we shall not find him? Is he about to go to the dispersion, speaking of the northern tribes of Ephraim, who are called the so-called lost tribes of Israel? They seem to know where he is because listen to what they say. Is he about to go to the dispersion amongst the Greeks and to teach the Greeks? Because they called them Goyim during this time. They called the northern Israelites Greeks and Goyim, and we know that this is a fact. Yahushua said that he had come for the lost sheep of the house of Yisrael. And we know that he reached the Yahudim of his day, but he sent his apostles out, his shlechem, out into the world to find the lost tribes of Yisrael. And we know this because the book of James or Jacob or Jacob starts in the very first chapter in verse 1, to the scattered tribes of Yisrael scattered abroad. And he addresses them as if they are there even then. And to Kepha or Peter, we see that he calls the so-called Gentiles a royal nation, a chosen people. How can he say that unless he's reaching out to those Ephraimites? And of course, yes, there were real nations, Goyim, Gentiles, actual Gentiles who were turning back to Yahuwah. But think about it. There were Gentiles at the synagogue all the time when Paul shows up. It's the Gentiles who ask him to come back and teach the next Sabbath. It's always this way, many times. How is this? Because the way it was understood is that the Greeks were assimilated with Israelites. Israelites had assimilated into the Greeks, I should have said, and into other peoples. And that is why the Brit Hadasha is addressed in letter form to places like Ephesus and Galatia and all these places. That's why you read in the book of Revelation and you see the assemblies, the 7 assemblies. And you're like, wait a minute, did the Gentiles replace the Israelite assembly? There's these 7 special assemblies and they're all in Asia Minor, that is Turkey. We know where the Israelites were. These were Israelites. We know that there were Israelites at least there, and there were people of the other nations there. But the entire purpose of the Brit Hadasha was to reach out to Israel and to bring Ephraim back home again. And through the redemption of Ephraim, the Gentiles, the nations would also come in. And we know, of course, during the first century, all the believers in Yahushua just about were Yahudim. And then there were some Gentiles, of course, that mixed in. We read in the book of Acts. But by the time, like I said, of the early so-called church fathers, they're all Gentiles. So they weren't invested in Yahuwah's commandments and in his name, and they strayed far away. And what was called Natsrim are now called Christians. And this is very confusing to a lot of people, but we know that the book of Matthew and the good news, the Bashar, was written in the Hebrew language according to those same so-called church fathers. So we have to understand that this is the good news. So I want to summarize all of this in Luke chapter 15, starting in verse 11, and we're going to wrap this up. And he said, a certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods falling to me. And he divided his livelihood between them. And not many days after, the younger son, having gathered all together, went away to a distant country, and there wasted his goods with loose living. And when he had spent all, there arose a severe scarcity of food throughout the land, and he began to be in need. And when he went and joined himself to one of the citizens of that country, and he sent him to the fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to fill his stomach with the pods which the pigs were eating, and no one gave to him. But having come to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and I am perishing with hunger? Now I want you to understand, this is a picture of Ephraim. This is Ephraim, the younger son, who has gone out into the world and is now wanting to eat the things that the pigs are eating. He lost his identity because part of this half tribe is Manasseh, which means to forget. Right? I mean, they become a multitude of nations, but this is the point. Listen to what it says. When he came to himself, he says, the servants have bread enough to spare, and I am perishing with hunger. Having risen, I shall go to my father, who is Yahuwah. This is the truth of the parable. And say to him, Father, I have sinned against the heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. And having risen, he went to his father. And while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was moved with compassion and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And we know that the father created a great feast, a festival for this son. And that the older brother was upset. He's like, I served you always, Father, and you never gave me a feast. You never even gave me a goat. But you are going to slay the fatted calf for my son here who spent all of his wages on whoredom and ridiculous behavior. But listen to what it says in verse 31. Then he said to him, Son, you are always with me, and all I have is yours. And we had to rejoice and be glad, for your brother was dead, and he is alive. He was lost, and now he is found. This is Ephraim lamenting, turning back to Yahuwah, crying out for teshuvah in these last days, desiring him again. And this is why the controversy is taking place, because the people must hate Yahuwah, and they must hate his name, and they must despise his people, and they must despise Zion, because they are being raised up for devastation and destruction. We read about this in the book of Zechariah. And actually, I said I was going to wrap that up. I want to read this little portion in Zechariah because I believe that it is really important for people to comprehend the time frame in which we now live and we find ourselves. So let us go over to Zechariah chapter 14 is where we want to go here. Verse 1, See, a day shall come for Yahuwah, and your spoil shall be divided in your midst, and I shall gather all the nations, the Goyim, to battle against Yerushalayim. And the city shall be taken, the houses plundered, and the women ravished. Half the city shall go into exile, but the remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city. And Yahuwah shall go forth, and he shall fight against those nations, those Goyim, as he fights in the day of battle. Can you see this? This is going to transpire. You can see it. You can envision it transpiring even now. You see it all around you. The venom towards Yahuwah's people, the venom towards his land, the venom towards his Torah. They have done corruptly to his Torah, and for that reason, he will shake the whole earth, according to Yeshayahu the prophet. And Yahuwah shall go forth, and he shall fight against those Goyim as he fights in the day of battle. In that day his feet shall stand upon the Mount of Olives, which faces Yerushalayim on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from east to west, a very great valley, and half of the mountain shall move toward the north, and half of it towards the south. And what's the point of Yahuwah destroying these Gentiles, destroying these nations in that day, in the great day of Yahuwah? Verse 9 tells us, And Yahuwah shall be sovereign over all the earth, and in that day there shall be one Yahuwah, and his name one. Yahuwah Echad, Shmo Echad, the fulfillment of the Shema. Yahuwah Echad, Yahuwah is one, Shmo Echad, his name is one. May Yahuwah, the Elohim of Yisrael, barak you and keep you, make his face to shine upon you, and begin to reveal his Ruach HaKodesh to you, the path of Yahuwah through Yahushua HaNatsrim, through the Brit Hadasha, through the renewal of the covenant in his great name, the name above all names, which is Yahuwah, which he has bestowed upon his son, Yahushua, whose name means Yahuwah is salvation. Yahuwah is the Savior. May Yahuwah barak you and keep you in the name of Yahushua HaMashiach, as he's raising up through his servant Yahushua the tribes of Yaakov, the tribes of Jacob, just as it was prophesied. The Brit Hadasha was sent out to the tribes of Yisrael, and they have begun to adopt the truth and reveal. And in these last days, the manifestation of this is happening on the inward parts, because they're saying, I can rise up and go to my Father's house. They're not saying, hey, look at me, look at who I am. No, they're ashamed, and they know that Yahuwah is acting for his own name's sake. So they're saying, look who my Father is. My Father is Yahuwah, and I'm coming back to him. This is the message. This is how Yahuwah raises up his people in the end times. Yahuwah be with you, remnant of Yisrael, scattered abroad. In the name of Yahushua HaMashiach, Amen.